Good morning everyone. So we're going to do a watercolor tutorial and it is absolute basic. If you have never painted before, you'd like to start, you have no idea what to do, this is the tutorial for you. We are going to learn about all these things that you've heard if you've been watching some YouTube videos, and we're just going to explore the materials that we have. So I'll start with the very basics. Get yourself 2 glasses of water or 2 containers of water. One is going to be the container that you rinse your brush off, and the second one is going to be the one you get your clean water from. If you already have bought watercolors, we'll use them. Don't buy any others. This is you discovering your colors. Get some brushes. Any old brushes will do. The brushes, in my personal opinion, are the least important material to get. Once you've had a feel for what you've got, then you can start to explore. The number one thing is your paper. Now, today in Australia, we're going to use this Montmartre. It's like a cheaper kind of art supply brand here in Australia. But the important thing is it's 100% cotton. Not sure if you can see that here or whether it's going to be a little bit blurry for you. 100% cotton. If you can get your hands on 100% cotton paper, do it. It will make your life so much easier. If you don't get anything else out of this tutorial, get 100% cotton paper. It will make your life a lot easier and your experience with watercolors just a lot more enjoyable. So that is my recommendation. So like I said, what we're doing today is we are going to use this, and the reason for it is because it comes in a standard A4 size, which in Australia, I'm not sure what that is in American. I think it's 8 by 11 inch, I'm not sure. But this fits in my printer. I have a very cheap printer. It's nothing fancy. This comes in a block. It's about 10 pages. What does it say? 10 pages? Yep, 10 sheets, and it's 200 GSM. What that's referring to is how thick or the weight of the paper. 200 is like a nice thin. The reason I use this for things like this, for playing, is because 1, it's 100% cotton, and 2, it's not going to be a professional piece. It's for me to play and to get to know my colors. So I don't mind using something like this. And a block this size in Australia, you can pick up from a cheap shop, which is what I did, for about $10. It's not that expensive. So you can play to your heart's content. You can also order these guys online. I don't use these for my professional blocks that I sell. I use a different watercolor paper, Fabriano Artistico, but for this purposes of learning, and you hear so many people online say get cotton paper, that's what you need to get. So let's get straight into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our colors to mix and to play, and what I have done is on my Etsy store I have a digital download for complete beginners to learn how to paint. So that's what we're going to use as our base today. So Learn to Paint, a beginner watercolor guide. And this is for you to really understand how easy it is to paint and to play. So I'm just going to read through some of the things, and I'm going to read through the instructions and do exactly what I said to do. So it says, hi there, thanks for painting with me. This worksheet is designed for beginners. You can learn about colors and paints and how they work together. So scan this QR code, which will have this particular tutorial on it. This is what you get from the Etsy download when you download it, or it'll be on my website as well. It will take you to my YouTube channel. On there I have a whole range of videos with relaxing music and painting in real time. This is designed to relax, find out how to use your colors, and learn a little along the way. Please remember to print the following pages on watercolor paper. Normal kind of paper won't work. Have a look at my videos for more information about this, so that we've already talked about this straight away, because this is the key for you to enjoy what you're going to do. It's the paper. Most of all, relax, have fun, set aside an hour or so. This tutorial, I talk a lot, it's probably going to go for an hour as we go through it. You can start it, you can stop it, you can do one page at a time, completely up to you. And if you want any of my particular supplies, which I use, then these are the codes that you can have a look at. These are the brushes. Now I like to use a brand called Rosemary & Co. They're from England. Shipping can be a bit expensive to Australia, but once I found these, I just love the way they're shaped, the way they work. I think they're excellent quality, so I only use these now. The paints are Winsor & Newton paints. I have a whole range of colours, but I've got a different tutorial talking about that, why I chose these, and the paper, which is the paper I use for my professional work. But let's start with the basics. If you have never ever painted before, let's start with this. So you might have a set of paints or what have you that you're like, how do I use it? What do I do? Where do I go? Let's do this together. What I've done, I've just printed, like I said, this download that I got from my Etsy store onto watercolor paper. My printer is not fancy. If the water gets on these print lines, which I'll give you an example, it might run a little bit. Now you can see there, it's a little bit grey. It's run a tiny bit. I don't actually care. This is for me to discover my colours. If I was being really fanatical about it, I'd get a laser printer or whatever. Just make sure that it's the watercolor paper. Get the size that fits your printer. If you don't have a personal printer, go to your print copy shop with a block in the regular print size of your choice and just ask them if they do it. Some are great and they're like, sure, no problem. It's not thick cardstock. It is card, but it's not super thick. My really cheap $70 printer did it just fine. So what we're going to start says, please use watercolor paper printed on an inkjet printer. It can be inkjet, any printer. Regular paper won't work. Use this to find out how your colors play with each other. So I think I've got the wrong one first. Oh, I do have the wrong one first. Okay, let's flip it over. Use this to find out how your colors play with each other. Now, each of these will be numbered and you'll be able to see it. It says use warm primary color paints and use cool primary color paints. We got no clue what warm or cool is. We're just starting. So let's have a look down. Read, for example, so we're in the warm category. The red that looks most like a fire engine color. So whenever you think of fire engine, have a look in your palette. And I've got some extra pieces here just to have a look, just to play. And I've got a red here, which looks quite red. Honestly, the one next to it too is like a pinky red. And then I've got another red just here. So I'm gonna go all three and see, that one's more of a pinky color. So that doesn't remind me of a fire engine. Okay, same with this one. That one's a more pinky color. That again does not remind me of a fire engine. The one that does is the first one. You would have seen it straight away. That kind of red is more like the fire engine color that I'm after. So for the colors that I have in my palette here, that is a warm red. That's the one that reminds me the most about a fire engine. So I've got a tiny bit of water on my brush. I'm just bringing it across on my paints and I'm just going to paint it underneath to remind me. This one is the one that looks most like a fire engine. So that's going to be my warm red. Now your warms and your cools, this is where people get confused, is going to be different depending on the colors that you have in your palette or in the set that you've bought. That's why you're trying to find the most that reminds you of a certain object. For a beginner, that's the easiest way for us to relate to it. The yellow that looks most like the sun or a sunset. Again, I've got two yellows here in my palette. Okay? I've got one here and one here. Now on the camera, it might be quite hard to pick up. So this yellow here, when I look at it in the pan, I'm just getting some water and I'm trying to activate the paint. Okay. When I look at it, it is a nice, lovely, sunny color. Okay. But the yellow next to it, which I'm trying to pick up, I'm hoping it'll show up on the camera, but this is where I want you to experiment and play. Okay. They look very similar, but one is a little bit more warmer or sunnier or more like a deeper color. So out of these two, one looks more like a lemon yellow, like how I imagine lemons, and others is a more warm yellow. It's like more of a light bulb kind of yellow. So out of these two, the yellow that looks most like the sun or a sunset, and then we've got the yellow that looks most like a lemon. That's how I'm going to divide them up. It'll be different in your palette because you might have slightly different yellows. But for this one, out of the two that I've got, this one here is the one to me that looks most like the sun, the kind of warmth that the sun has. So I'm going to choose that to be in my warm side. And I'll just swap over here because it's just easier at the moment. The red that looks most like a magenta pink. Now when we had a look at our reds over here, if we have a look at our colors here, that's definitely a fire engine. This one is more like a purple, so I wouldn't call that like a magenta color. So I'm going to go for the one in the middle, which is this one here. And for me, that's going to be the red that looks more like a magenta pink. Oopsie, I just dropped my brush. That's life. So you can see every time that I'm changing colors as well, I am rinsing my brush off in the jar that's a little bit bigger. That's my rinse jar. And then I'm picking up fresh water from my palette because I don't want to mix up the colors. Now the yellow that looks most like a lemon. So we had the one that looks most like the sun. So I'm going to pick up the one that I decided was more like lemon. And for me, I find it really hard to tell the difference between the yellows. I'm not a big yellow fan. I don't use a lot of it in my work, and I don't really wear it, so I don't really love it. But that's what, in my painting right now with my palette and the yellows that I have, these are gold, by the way, so that's why they look yellow, but they're actually gold. The little gold flakes, so that's why I didn't use them in my example. Now let's go. The blue that looks most like the sky, and the blue that looks most like the Caribbean Paradise Ocean blue. I'm trying to use words that help us kind of relate to the different colors. Now, you'll see in my palette, I've got these two colors here. These are the blues that I have. This one is also a blue. So what I'll do is I will swatch out, I will get all these blue colors. Actually, this one here is a blue as well. Okay. So if we have a look at that, we can see that that is quite a dark blue. That is an indigo color. Not what I'm after. It doesn't really look like the sky, and it doesn't really remind me of like a paradise, ocean, whatever. This other blue, that's better, much better. Okay. But it's still a bit dark, I feel. Now, your watercolors that you've bought, it might not have 4 blues in it. Just compare the blues that you have and then try and work it out from there. This one here, actually I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5 blues in my palette. Okay. Now we're getting a bit closer. Okay. But this is where it gets interesting. That more is like a turquoise to me. Now some Paradise Oceans look like a turquoise. I'll give you that. Let's swatch out the other two, which are the main ones that I wanted to use. Now we want a blue that looks most like the sky and the blue that looks most like the Caribbean Ocean. So this one as well is quite dark, but if I add a little bit of extra water to it, I can get a really nice kind of, it does look like a very clear blue sky. I like that one, and I'm going to use that one. So for me, and my palette, I feel that these are too dark to be the sky. Like if we compare those two, this one here is definitely more sky-like than that one there. So compare the colors that you have. So for me, that looks most like the sky. Got some more water. There we go. Now, because we're using watercolor paper, it just absorbs the color really well. When it's 100% cotton, imagine trying to put water in a bowl of cotton wool compared to a bowl of sawdust. Now paper is normally made of like wood pulp, so it absorbs water, it's fine, but it doesn't absorb it the same way that cotton wool does. And the benefit with using watercolor and 100% cotton paper is that you're absorbing the moisture, the water, as well as the tiny little particles of pigment. And that's what makes watercolor really cool to work with. The blue that looks most like the Caribbean ocean paradise. Now, I've never been to the Caribbean, so maybe I've used the wrong words, I'm not sure. Now this one, I'm just rinsing my brush off, so when we get the lighter one, we can really see, you can see the difference between those two blues, even on the camera. That reminds us more like a very clear sky, and that's just, for me, that's just water in, I don't know, Phuket or Koh Samui, I don't know. So I'm going to choose over these. Now you may wonder, why did you choose this one over this one? For me, that's more of a turquoise. I could use it, but I'm not going to. These are colors that probably won't be in most beginner sets as well. I actually added that color to my set later on because I liked it. But you can see the difference between the two colors here. Okay. And this is where we start learning about the colors that we have. Now, your colors might look slightly different because you'll have a different color palette. That's fine, you'll have different paints. Grab my cup of tea. That's absolutely fine. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a color wheel using the paints that we have. So we can imagine that this is the paints we're going to use for this wheel, and this is the paints we're going to use for this wheel. So it wants the ocean blue in there, so let's do that. We'll give that ocean blue. Rinse off my brush. It wants the lemon in that one. More color on my brush. Put the lemon in there. It's nice. Rinse off my brush. Make sure I do it well so I'm not mixing up the colors. And it wants the magenta in this one. That looks lovely. Now it's asking us, it's not asking us, but kind of intuitive. This is still a little bit wet, so I'm going to put some water in here, and I'm going to pick a little bit from this side and a little bit from this side and mix it in here. Now if I want a stronger color, I'll pick them up from my palette. This side, and a little bit from this side, and that's the color that I get. Now you can see, because I've got a dodgy printer, the ink from the printer is running into it, making it a little bit muddy. So I'll try and be a good girl and not go on those lines. So I've just got some water on my brush. I picked up some lemon. Now I'll get a teeny bit of the ocean blue, and you can see what kind of green that makes. How vibrant is that? That's lovely. Let's grab some more of the yellow and make it a bit more bright. That's really nice. I'm going to do the same thing with the magenta and the blue. I'll grab the magenta and I'll pop it on. Now you'll get to know this after time as well. I've done so many of these, honestly. I've got them on my wall. I just play. I made a rainbow with them once. Oh, mix up the other one. I do them all the time because I want to see how my paints react with each other and the different kinds of like effects that I can get. And I've noticed that if I start off with magenta, or if I start off with lemon and then add the blue, I get a better result because the blue seems to be very strong. So if I do this now, see, it's super strong. I don't like how strong that is. I'm rinsing off the rest of that blue and just a little bit of water, just so I don't overpower and I get a nice purple there. I'm going to add a little bit more magenta because I really want to see it like a nice bright purple. That's cool. Okay, I can see the difference with all those colors. Now I'm going to swap over to this side and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but I'm going to use my fire engine, the one that looks like a sunset and the one that looks most like a sky. You will see the difference between the two. So let's start with our sky. There's our sky blue. Now I'm purposely ignoring other colors in my palette because we're beginners. We want to try and understand the colors that we have. And the best way to do that is to use colors that, what we call primary colors. So this red, blue and yellow, we can't blend other colors to make these colors. That's what we call primary colors. They have to be there in their own right, otherwise we can't get any other color. We need these three to get other colors. That's how we start mixing. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pick up some of my sunny yellow and a little bit of my fire engine red and mix that in there. Red is a bit strong with this yellow, so I'm going to rinse off my brush. But you can see a difference between this orange and that orange. This one is a lot more vibrant than that orange, and that's a good thing to know. We know if we want some really nice vibrant oranges, then the fire engine red and the yellow that looks most like a sunset really give us those deep colors. Let's have a look at the purple. This one I find very interesting. Put down my fire engine red, rinse off my brush. I'll pick up some of my sky blue, and the blue is always strong, and I'll mix that in. Now this purple is, where's my fire engine red? There it is. Oh no, sorry. Mixing up. This purple is kind of gross in my opinion. It doesn't remind me of a purple. But it is a purple. It's just very muted and very understated. This is more like a candy colored purple, and this is a very natural, earthy looking purple. So that's an interesting thing. If I get a blue that's a very earthy sky looking blue and a fire engine red, the purple it makes is very different to the pink throw of the red and the ocean blue. Very different colors. And you'll see exactly the same with the green. You can see how nice and lovely and vibrant this green is. When I mix this warm blue with this, you will see that it changes the color green in such an interesting way. So I'm going to start off with my yellow. Now remember, blue is a very strong pigment, so I'll only get a tiny bit. And let's mix this in with our yellow. Try to get more blue. Now have a look at the green that this has made. It's so interesting how these colors give you different kinds of the same color. This green is so poppy and bright, but this one is so muted and so earthy. It reminds me of grass or brush or something like that. So you can see just from these color wheels that the purple, the orange and the green are very different. Purple, the orange and the green from this one. So different. That is good for us as beginners, because sometimes we will mix a color when we're painting, and especially with watercolors. Let me give you an example. I might be thinking, oh, I want a really happy, bright kind of picture, a little bit like this. But if we're using these warmer colors, it's not going to look bright and poppy like this. It's going to be a lot more dull and a lot more muted. And if we didn't know that it was the colors that we're choosing that give us this effect, we could feel frustrated and feel like we don't know what we're doing. The reason that this looks so poppy and bright and happy is because I only used these colors to make these flowers. I didn't use the fire engine red or the yellow that looks like the sun or that kind of blue. I only used these ones here. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind if you have an idea for a picture. As another example, okay, this is a small landscape that I've done. You will see on this one It's not poppy, it's not super bright, it's actually quite earthy. That's because I used these colours, not these ones, to get this effect. And so the difference is whether something is bright and poppy. Let me give you another example, like this one, or whether it's more earthy and understated, like this one. The colours that you choose will set the mood. Let me give you another example. Okay. Same principle. This one here, this little landscape, was made using the cool colours, the ones that was like magenta, the lemon, this kind of turquoisey blue. This landscape, exactly the same method in mixing, but I used the warmer colours. You can see that they're very similar but totally different mood, and that's because I either chose these colours to mix or these colours to mix. That's the difference. And that's what, as a beginner, you don't realise. You just think blue is blue. I'm going to mix it and we'll see what happens. So this is going to be a long tutorial. Feel free to have a break and have a cup of tea. I'm going to have another cup of tea. It's cold now, but that's okay. On the next part of your list, we've got playing with colours, and we're doing exactly the same thing, and we're seeing how colours play with each other. Now print this one out twice, more than once. Now I'm going to use only the cool colours for this page, and then I'll use only the warm colours for the next page. But as an example, let's do this. So I'm going to do exactly the same as I did just before. I'm going to put the magenta in one. I didn't put the label names, just so you can choose which one you put where. And I'm going to put that blue, the ocean, lovely ocean blue, and I'm going to put the lemon yellow right here. So to mix these two, just to remind me, the ocean blue, that's the lovely green that I get. I'll do the same with here. I'll start off with the yellow, rinse my brush, dry it off, grab some more water, grab some of the magenta colour. And I've put a little bit more magenta, so the orange is a little bit brighter than the one before. That's good. You're playing and exploring. Grab the magenta, rinse off my brush, and I'll grab some blue. Now, these are kind of basic, but we're beginners, so that's why they're so basic. So let's go with the red, rinse off my brush, and the yellow. When I mix those two together, and this is where you can start mixing on your palette. So I'm going to put the yellow, and I'm going to put a little bit of red. That's what makes this orange. And start by this is to get to know your specific colours, what they look like, and just keep going with this. Let's get the red. Let's get the blue. You can be neater than me. I'm a mess, so it doesn't matter. And I'll grab the red, and I'll grab a little bit of blue. And this is the, whoops. I put too much blue in that one. Oh, I used the wrong red, that's why. This is the problem. Okay, put that red and this red. Yeah, I've used the wrong red. I mixed it up even. Okay, so I'd print this out twice, and I'd do it, one for the warm, one for the cool. Now we're looking at primary and secondary colours. So again, let's go with what we're doing. So we have the magenta, and we have yellow. These are our primary. These are the colours we can't mix. and our blue. And then we want secondary colours. So our secondary colours are the ones that are in between. It's the orange. They're the ones that we have to, the only way we can get them is by mixing them with a primary colour, mixing primary colours together. Okay, and purple, I know I can get a purple. There we go, I'm using the right colours now. That's better. That's what that colour should look like. And green. So I'm mixing blue and yellow together. Grab a bit of blue. No, grab a bit of yellow. See, I'm mixing myself up now. Grab a bit of blue, and then we get the green. Okay. Those are the primary colours. Okay. Now let's have a look at the warm colours. Again, this is just exercises for you to figure out what's warm and cool. Okay, warm colours. That makes me think of a fire engine. This makes me think of a sunset. And this makes me think of a sky on a hot sunny day. Cool colours. This makes me think of lemon. This makes me think of a magenta pink. Cool. There's so many ideas about how to tell things are warm and cool. Let's just try and get with the basics, get our magentas, ocean blues, things like that. Right, so we're just playing again, we're getting to know how our colours react with each other. This little exercise, complementary colours. These are opposites on the colour wheel. Pick one colour for one side and then the opposite, okay? So let's pick the green. And I'm going to put it on one side of my that's the green. And let's look at what's opposite, okay? Now, it's a little bit hard to see here. Let me grab a pen. When I say opposite in this sense, we're looking at a triangle, okay? Because we've only got 6 colours, okay? And then we've got this as a triangle here. Okay? So the green, the opposite to that is the orange colour. Okay? That didn't work very well. When those two are together, they complement each other because they're opposite each other. This is the same thing. If we've got the green here, so let's mix up our green again. Which one am I? Okay. So we've got another green. Now you'll see that this green is darker than that one. I've just added more paint. So I've got a very different, this is like lots of water, so it looks kind of washed out. And this is very intense. I put more paint instead of more water. And let's do the purple this time. Let's grab the purple. Okay. They complement each other. They look good together, side by side, because they're opposite on the colour wheel. So you can do this same with here. Okay, if we imagine that that's like a triangle, that blue and yellow, they work well together because they're opposite each other. So there's the blue, and here's the yellow. They work really well next to each other. They're good friends. Okay. Analogous colours. I don't like that word. It's a big word. It doesn't make sense to me. Basically, these are colours that are close to each other on the wheel, and they kind of work well together because they're neighbours. They get on well. Okay, so let's have an idea here. We've got our magenta pink. Rinse off my brush. Now, the magenta pink mixed with a little bit of blue has this beautiful purple. Okay, let's put that next to each other. I'll make up a little bit more of that purple. Okay. And let's put it next to each other. Okay. Again, these are quite dark. That, compared to that, looks like a different colour. But this one has more water, that one has more paint. So you can start to see how many different variations you get just from mixing colours. Okay. Let's do this next one. Let's do this blue. And let's do the green that's next to it. Okay. They work well together because they're next to each other on the colour wheel. Same with the yellow. Let's do the yellow. Let's go for the orange. Oh, sorry. I picked up the wrong colour again. I'm getting confused. Okay. Again, you can see the orange here and the orange here. They look different. This has more water. This has less water. That's the difference. So use this to play with your colours. Now you might be thinking, what's the point of mixing when I can just buy the colour? You're absolutely correct. The point of mixing is to find how colours are friends or not friends or don't work. Once you've figured out the colours you like, you're not going to sit there mixing your colours. You're going to be like, oh, I really like how that orange works. Instead of me mixing the orange all the time, I'm just going to buy that orange. You'll find the orange that's closest to that mix. There are hundreds of colours. This is beginner. This is for you to try and understand how colour works with each other in a very simple way. I'm in no way an expert, but I'm just trying to share the things that I've learnt because I think it's been fun. So this is colour. Okay. And we're already quite deep into this. So if your brain is exploding right now, stop the video, go and have a cup of tea, and come back. Now we're going to do what I find the easiest things are to do. Okay? Brush strokes. Now you will have in your collection quite a number, just as I do, of all these different kinds of brushes. Okay? Big, small, whatever. Okay? So for me, I have conservatively maybe about 30 or 40 different brushes that I've collected over the years. I didn't go out and buy them all at once. It's kind of, people have given them to me. I've seen a brush and I thought that looks nice, so I bought it. But in all honesty, I use only 4 brushes regularly, these 4. And my number one most used brush is this one, the dagger brush. There'll be links to it in the comments below and in this guide. But you can have 40 or 50 brushes just like I do, and you'll always gravitate to 2 or 3. That's just the nature of it. The good thing about this little thing is you can get to know which ones you like. I did this, and that's how I know which brushes I like. I can't remember what sketchbook I've done. If you go through my sketchbook tours, you'll see that I literally opened my sketchbook, it's not this sketchbook, to a blank page. I dipped in my brush and I just played with the brush. I did it with all of them until I found the brush that I thought made the coolest marks for what I liked. What I like is going to be different to what you like. Who cares? We're all individual. Find what you like. So what you're going to do is you're going to get to know your materials. So here I've just made up a little sheet. Print off as many of these as you want. As many brushes that if you've got 50 brushes, print off 10 of these pages, and then each one you'll have a record that you can stick up in your studio. So for me, the brush name and number. I know that this is a Rosemary and Co. dagger brush, and I can't remember the size, but it's got a name, it's got a number. I can look that up after. Okay. I'm going to experiment with this brush, the flat wash. So I'm just going to, oh dear, I just put water on my other paints. Bummer. just going to grab some water and I'm just going to get a colour out of my palette, any old colour. I'm going to choose this purple because it's nice and bright. And I want to do a flat wash. So I'm playing with the brush and I'm just going to do, it's filled with quite a bit of water and paint, and I'm just going to try and make a nice even wash of colour. Okay. And for this brush and this size, I find it's quite easy to do. That's really easy. I like that. Okay. So in my head, I know, okay, this is going to be a good brush for fairly large areas of water. And this is where this little brush, testing out the brush strokes, is good. Here is another brush I use quite often. All of the labels have worn off, so that's probably not a good idea. Let me try this one. Okay. This one is another Rosemary & Co. It's an A&I brush. So I don't remember. So it's a Rosemary & Co. A&I brush. And Artisan, there we go, Artisan Illustrators promo. I think this came free when I ordered a brush. I know, I can tell, this is not a real hair brush, so I'm going to say it's a, it's an acrylic, I think, acrylic brush. Okay, it's not the hair of a animal or anything. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try and do a flat wash, lots of water. And I can tell already it's harder for me to do a flat wash in this brush because it doesn't hold as much water. I can tell this from this one little exercise. It's working fine, but you'll notice I'm having to scrub it a little bit more. Okay. So that tells me, okay, this brush is probably not going to be good for big areas. So that's good to know. So let's keep going with our little example of the Rosemary Dagger brush. The marks that I can make with this brush, and just play. I'm getting more paint. I'm going to mix it up on my palette. I'm just going to play. So see how it's got an angle on this? I'm just holding it like a pencil. What marks can I make? I can make up and down marks like this. And if I straight up and down. Interesting. The bristles like separate from each other so you can get some nice feathering. So for straight up and down and pull it to the side and then up. Good to know. What happens if I do it again? Make some feathering. Okay. You can get some cool, that's kind of cool. Interesting. You can kind of get some cool marks. Let's do the same thing with our other brush. I'll get some paint. What kind of marks can I make? Let's try flat. I'll start with a point, up and down, and then I'll drag it and then bring it up. Okay, I can get some cool. Let's try it again. Seems to not always be filled with water very well, this brush, so that's a good thing to keep in mind. How does it go with flicking? Okay. It doesn't seem to have as fine of lines as my dagger brush, so that's something I'll keep in mind for later. What about if I make... that's interesting. See how the dagger brush kind of feathered out a little bit, whereas this one, all the bristles stay together. So that's good to know. Okay. Now, this is an interesting one. Okay. Now a dry brush. What I'm going to do is I'll rinse it off and I'll wipe off all the excess moisture. And you can see there's like a little pool of paint. I'm going to pick up that pool of paint and I'm going to apply the paint with just the pool and see what happens. So see how it's leaving, see how it's different to the flat wash? It's leaving little bits of white in between. So let's do the same thing, just rinse that off with my other brush. I don't have any moisture on there, so with a dry brush, similar effect, but definitely it doesn't hold as much moisture at all compared to this one. I mean, this is a bigger brush, but it's also a different texture. So I could use that in my paintings. That could be a good effect. So I know that brush would work well with it. as an example, wet on wet. So let's wet both these pages, both these here, very slightly. And let's see what marks I can make when the brush is wet and the paper is wet with this particular brush. I'm putting more colour on my palette, and because it's got a fine point, I'm going to just play and see. Because the bristles like to separate, you kind of get some cool shapes and stuff. That's good to know. So now up here is dry, and I've kind of gone a little bit rogue and playing with it. I really like this brush. There's a reason I chose it. I love the effects that you can get with it. But you can see when it's wet, you can see all the colours kind of, I'd like drop in more colour. This brush is good. It holds on to colour really well. Let's try with my other one. We know that that's still wet. So I'm going to pick up some colour with that. Wet brush, wet paper. Let's see what marks I can make. It seems that this brush, it does, when it's wet on wet, it does hold on to its water a bit more, but it doesn't, the bristles don't separate. Not compared to the other brush, and I like the separation of the bristles. Now, the reason we did this, how am I going to know what each brush does if I don't play? And that's the point of having a worksheet like this. You might have, like I said, 10 brushes. Play with all 10, see what marks they make. I know, personally, that this brush here, it's very different. You can see that they are very different brushes. This one is long and skinny. This one looks like a knife. So this one automatically is going to have very different effects. I'm going to be able to get tiny wee lines. Play with your brushes. That's what this little section is for. Okay? Brush strokes. If you're still with me, you are amazing. Now, this is where you test how much water capacity your brushes have. This takes up a whole page of your 100% watercolor paper. If you just want to do half a page, do half a page. Up to you. This is your tutorial. Okay? Put a line down the middle. Break it up. Completely up to you. Okay? So the same kind of thing. Let's do this. This one is what we call an R5. Okay, so this one again. So this helps me just to know this can be hung up. Once I've done all this is the beauty about it. Once all these are done, don't throw them away. Stick them up on your walls of your studio. You have what you have created, and it reminds you of different things. What colors did you like going together? How did it feel when you were painting it? Okay, what effects did you get? Okay, this one's a Rosemary & Co. It's an R5, and I know that this has a special name. It's called a rigger brush. Okay. And let's choose a different brush now for our next little experiment. Okay. This one, again, it's a Rosemary & Co. My messy writing, and it's a series 201. It's written on here, and it's a number 4 that's written on here. So I know that this one is an animal hair brush because that was on the description when I bought it, and I know that this one is not. We want to test how much water each one holds, and you can do that again with all of your brushes. Okay, print out as many as you need, and the reason again we're doing it on 100% cotton paper, it's not a waste, because if you're going to do watercolor for a while, that's all you will use. That's all you will play with. So you'll get to know how much the brushes and the paper work together, the paint and the paper work together. So I'm going to fill my brush with water as much as I can, and I'm going to pick up some pigment and try and get as much water into my brush. Now that is one fully loaded brush. I can see that the pigment comes quite high. And I'm going to try and just do a pattern until the brush runs out. I might try this way. So you can see It's still, the paper is dry, so it's sucking out the pigment and the water from my brush. And a good brush that does that will be able to distribute it evenly. Now you can see it's starting to really dry out because it's getting quite patchy. Almost gone, almost a completely dry brush. Oh, there's still a little bit in there somewhere. Okay, let's go along here until we completely run out. Almost completely gone, tiny wee lines. This is a great exercise, and I can see like most of the colour has gone out of that. If I rinse it out, it's no colour is coming out of there at all. Let's do exactly the same thing with our other series 201. So wet the brush, fully load it with water, fully load it with colour. Let's do the same thing and see how long it lasts. And we can see it's a different brush. Wow, that didn't last long at all. Look at that. Completely different effect. Now this teaches us that this brush is going to hold a lot more colour and a lot more water than this one. So while I'm doing a painting, it might be part of my process to keep going back and picking colour up, or it might be frustrating. I'd choose this one over this one. And this is the thing that we're trying to understand and we're trying to get out of it. So do that with as many brushes as you want, print it out as many times as you want. We're nearly there, we're getting there, guys. Value. Now this is where you start to have fun with different colours. So choose a colour. For example's sake, I'm going to choose this pink. This lovely magenta pink. I'm going to load up as much colour and water in this little pan to help you. Okay, so value. Value shows how light and how dark a colour can be. Add more water for light, less water for dark. We are trying to go for the extremes of the colours that you have. When you look at the colours in your pan, you'll notice these colours here, they all look extremely dark. That is the darkest the colour will get. The lightest the colour will get is completely different. So let's do an example. Let's choose this colour here, which is indigo. If we look at it, it is so dark, it looks black. So let's pick up, I've got water on my brush, but I don't have a lot. I'm trying to pick up as much colour as I possibly can. Okay? Let me paint it in here. Now to that looks pretty dark. That's almost as dark as you can get with that particular colour. Now I've still got a lot of colour on my brush. I'm going to dilute some of that with the water. And let's see if I can get a little lighter tone. See how it's a little bit lighter? Now, let's rinse off a tiny bit more water. I'll pick up a little bit more water. That might be a little bit too much water that I rinsed off. It's lighter again. Let's pick up a little bit more water, tiny bit. It's lighter again. What's the lightest I can get it? So these, they all look a little bit the same. So maybe I rinsed off too much water, but you can see that there is a gradient. Okay? The more water you add, the lighter the colour. If you saw that colour on its own and that colour on its own, you wouldn't know it's the same colour. But this is where the testing comes out. Print out as many of these as you want for as many colours as you got. Let's do another example. Okay? Let's make a different colour. That's the indigo that I chose. Let's choose it for, go back in there, you. In your pot. There we go. Take that one. Okay. Let's choose it for our purple. Okay. It looks quite dark in the pan. Let's do the same thing. Do it up here. That's very dark. Let's try and make it as light as possible. Let's try and go as light as possible with this purple. That's the same purple. That's very light. Now let's go in the middle. We're trying to, that's in the middle of both, maybe a little bit touch too light. We can drop some more colour in there. Now let's try and go in the middle of those two. Okay. Darker than this, but lighter than this. Again, that might be a little bit too dark, so let's pick up some more colour. That's better. And let's try and go in between this, a bit darker, but lighter than that. And you can see, again, we've just used one colour. If you had this and this, you would think they're two different colours. And then we've got all these different shades in between. That's how you're learning about your colours. So now let's try a new technique. Create your own value scales with a colour opposite to the one above on your colour wheel. So we use the blues or the purples. So let's try orange. Okay? It's given us instructions. Let's try something different. Wet the page. Okay? Let's wet the page. And then put the colour and watch it bleed onto the page. So I'm going to use orange, and I'm going to get as much orange as you can. It says wet on wet, light to dark. So let's try and get it really, really dark. So I'm trying to pick up a lot of colour out of this little orange one. Okay. And because I've wet the page, this is where watercolour is amazing. I'm going to tip the page up and let it run down. You'll see it run down. And I'm going to keep feeding it up here. Now watercolour is brilliant in that it goes, see how I'm keeping on feeding it, and it's automatically, because I've got it on an angle, it's running down. The more it runs away from us, we'll be automatically be able to make it lighter. So I've just rinsed off my brush. I'm going to pick up some clean water and I'm going to pull some of that over. Again, because I use a cheap dodgy printer, some of these black lines are kind of blurring it, making it a little bit difficult. But I don't care, because this is part of learning. So you can see we've got a very light value, we've got a very dark. It was really easy for us to do. We started with the dark, we fed it a little bit, rinsed off our brush, and then got water. Watercolor is more about water than the color. The more water, the different colors. The less water, the brighter, bolder, darker colors. Now let's try the same color, wet on dry. Okay, so we'll grab more of our orange. Let's try as dark as possible. Okay. Let's try and lighten it up with a little bit more water. Let's keep trying to lighten it up, more water. And I'm just dipping my paintbrush into the water each time, trying to get it as light as possible. Okay. And we've been able to get these very easily. So it's such a simple exercise. All of this is doing is just getting to know your colours and how they work and what they do with each other. It's very cool. Print out as many of these as you like. Do it with every colour that you have. I say this and you're like, oh, it's too expensive, I can't do this. This is part of the fun. It's so much fun just to sit here. It's so relaxing to just sit here and play with the colours, see how they interact. These are really starting to dry, and you can see it looks different to when we first started. That looks a lot lighter. Watercolour dries lighter because the water evaporates out of it and the colour composition changes a little. It's fine. Play. Just play. Play with all the colours. What's the darkest of the colour you can get? What's the lightest of the colour you can get? So we've got that fantastic little exercise. Last one, I promise. This is brilliant. Print off as many of these as you have colours. This is a colour catalogue. Print these off and then cut them out and then stick them all over your wall. This is such a good way to figure out what colours you have in your palette. So here is an example. This one I know is called Permanent Rose. So the brand I'm using is Winsor & Newton brand. The pigment number, which is the number if you get like fancier paints, if they're not like professional or student grade, they won't have a pigment number. But if you do, they will always have a pigment number. A pigment number is just telling you what coloured powder they've used. They all have a code. P is for pigment. V in this case is for violet, and the number 19. So they've used a violet coloured pigment, specifically number 19. So that's what I'm going to write there, PV19. But they've called this colour Permanent Rose. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is the mass tone. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in what the thickest, most saturated colour of this particular one is. As dark as I can get it. Okay? That's as dark as I can get it. Okay? And it's kind of a bit similar to the actual pan. And now the swatch. Now the swatch is for you to see darkest to lightest. So I cleaned off my brush, got more water, and I'm getting it. Now I'm going to wash off my brush and I'm going to pull down with more water and see how it flows down. This is where the cotton paper comes in beautifully. You can see how dark it can be, but also the gradient it can be, which is great to know. Let's try a different colour that we haven't tried yet. This one here. Okay. So this one looks quite dark. We can see it's a little bit of a green. Okay. Again, this is Winsor & Newton. The pigment that they've used in this one is pigment. G stands for green. It's number 7. So PG7. The name that they've used for this is Winsor Green. And then what we're going to do is we are going to swatch this one out exactly the same way. So I've got a clean brush with just clean water on it, getting as much, and I'm trying to get the darkest possible tone. You can see already what kind of a brilliant colour this can be. So I'm going to do the same thing with my swatch. Darkest one, rinse off my brush, grab some clean water and pull it down. And I can get I might just tip up my page as well, that will help it a little bit. Tip it up. And you can see the kind of colours you can get. Do that with all of your colours and you will have this amazing catalogue of what your colours look like when they're straight from the pan and what they look like mixed with a lot of water and the kind of fall or the kind of gradient that you get. That was a long one. I didn't expect it to go for this long. It's been about an hour and we haven't even touched most of the colours. So this is such an interesting and such a lovely way just to get to know your brushes, get to know your paints, get to know your colours. It's fabulous. I personally use this and I personally do it. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. I did it years ago, but I am going to do it again because my colours have changed. I've got more colours in my palette that I like and I'm going to test out. I've gotten different brushes. I've gotten newer brushes, so I'm going to test that out and try that out. I've had that dagger brush for years, not realising its potential because I never did this at the beginning, doing the brush strokes. Warm and cool colours scare me, but now once doing a little bit of these exercises, I realise now that if I want something bright and lovely and poppy, I've got to choose the kinds of reds, the kinds of yellows, the kinds of blues. If I want something more earthy and more grounded, I've got to choose a different type of colours. And then you'll notice in your palette, if you've got a professional, I started out with 24 colour Winsor & Newton professional colours. I had no clue what I was doing. The only criteria for me was get a professional set of paints. At the time, it cost me about $100. I'm not someone that skips around with hobbies at all. And I thought, if it's a good set, I will keep it for a long time. This set has been brilliant. You can see I've replaced the colours I've almost run out of with the bigger ones. And I have just spent years literally doing these every few months. because it's fun. I find it super relaxing, and I learn a lot about my colors. I learned how they change, and they change when they dry, all sorts of things. Anyway, I think an hour for this tutorial is actually quite enough. So if you have any questions, if you have any ideas, I'm going to leave the link to these worksheets down below. Like I said, please, out of everything, print them on 100% watercolor paper if you can get your hands on it. If you can't, it'll be a bit sad, but I completely understand as well. Different countries don't have access to certain types of paper. The paper is king every time. It doesn't matter what your brushes are, it doesn't matter what your paints are. Your paper is what's going to frustrate you or going to keep you going. That's the only thing. If you don't take anything away as a beginner artist, just use good paper. Any other paper would kind of be a bit harder and like frustrate your plans a little bit. I also have these little kits. I don't have them in my store at the moment, but I'll pop them on hopefully by the time the video comes up. And this is just basically these colors. I've got another tutorial on my YouTube channel about this. These colors with a little bit of explanation about it, and then it just gives you a tester on how to do things. If you don't have a printer that prints the PDF out that's linked down below, just draw it out, copy it out. Like I said, I have done so many of these and they don't all look the same. Okay, I literally did this on a piece of paper just to play. Like you can see here, they're quite similar. Put them in the right way. So I've done these. I didn't have to have a structure. I was just playing around, and I was playing with how does that mix with that? How does that mix with that? And how does that mix with that? And just play. Please just play. It is so relaxing and it's so nice to do. And I'm just going to stop here because otherwise I'll be rattling on for another 10 minutes about how nice it is just to play. You'll see in my sketchbook. This is not the right one. The rest are in the thing. This is probably not the greatest example, but yeah, all I was doing was just grabbing two colors and like, what would the same idea look like with two completely different colors? And that was the purpose of this page here. I used this brush and I'm like, what kind of nice little things can I get? And you can see, like, it's just fun. Got little things here, and I liked how that went, and I liked how thin the lines could be, and same with here. I was like, does this green and this purple go together? In my opinion, no, it doesn't. It looks terrible. I know that now because I had to play. Does this color, my favorite color, it looks great, but probably won't use it anytime soon. How about this orange and this blue? Yeah, it might work. It didn't work here. These aren't fantastic landscapes. I'm playing. I don't care. So just play. You can see here, this is like, this page is a shipwreck, but you can see here I had the gold watercolor, and I'm like, how am I going to get these like things? Play, just play. But these little things help you here. I give you a little bit of structure if having that kind of freedom is a little bit too much. But yes, please comment down below. Tell me how you found this tutorial. I talk a lot. I love color. I don't know what else to say. Like I said, I'm going to stop the video. So thank you. Please tag me. Tell me how you feel, whether you love it. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to know. Yes. So thank you for being with me. And if you've stuck with me for this whole hour and a bit, you're welcome. Thank you very much. So we'll talk to you later. And yeah, please just have fun and please just play. Love to see it.